Very exciting time. I personally believe we're on the brink of really being able to bring healthcare supply chain into a much more competitive industry to our peers on the manufacturing or grocery or other areas.
Welcome to Revenue Cycle Above the Bottom Line, the podcast where we dive deep into the world of revenue cycle management. I'm your host, Tim Reiner, and in each episode, we sit down with industry leaders, innovators, and experts to explore challenges and strategies shaping the future of healthcare revenue cycle. Whether you're a seasoned professional or just starting out in the field, this podcast is your space for thought-provoking conversations, actionable career learnings, and discussions about the latest trends you need to know about. Thanks for tuning in, and let's get started. Today, I'm joined by Marisa Farabaugh, Senior Vice President and Chief Supply Chain Officer for AdventHealth. In her role, Marisa provides strategic direction towards new and sustainable supply chain and business service efficiencies. She is also responsible for system-level environmental sustainability work, along with governance and strategy for design and construction services, ancillary and support service areas. Marisa, thank you for being on the podcast and for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a real treat.
So can you share with us a little bit about your role at AdventHealth? I rattled off some of that in the introduction, but what are the areas you're primarily responsible for?
Well, I have the opportunity to work aside a great team. In my capacity, I serve as Chief Supply Chain Officer, so I oversee our supply chain and business services areas. So supply chain, getting supplies all throughout our system, from sourcing and negotiating those contracts to the analytics that go in to support those negotiations, to the operations that then move products through our system.
And all the logistics.
And all the logistics, that's right. And then on the business services side, we've got different pharmacy areas on the procurement side, on the outpatient pharmacy services side. And then we've got our ancillary and support services, which are really referring to the aligning function within the organization for areas such as radiology, lab, respiratory care, food and nutrition, some of those areas. You mentioned environmental sustainability and design and construction already. And so we've got a great team, feel really fortunate and excited to work with them.
We're going to pull the thread on that in a minute, but that's really exciting work. So you had a role, your first role in healthcare was as an industrial engineer, and then you kind of moved into supply chain operations. Tell us more about that move and kind of what led you to get into supply chain.
I find that the way to sort of think through problems and try to solve for at a macro level, but also try to solve something for how efficient can you make something work, path of least resistance, if you will, for the teams. I got my first gig out of college with my undergrad at Hershey Foods, and so was able to become an industrial engineer there, where we did a lot of financial engineering, so new candy bars that we were going to make on the line. What was our cost of goods sold? What were we going to sell it for? How much did it cost to operationalize it? What was our waste, et cetera? What type of capital needed to be invested in? So I learned a lot about companies, how to make things, manufacturing. I learned about what HR does, what IT does, et cetera. I got a chance to actually be a line supervisor during my time. I was over the two-finger Kit Kat line, which are very popular during the Halloween time period. We made a lot of those candies. And then I really enjoyed manufacturing, but I also felt like it was missing a little something for me. And so I remember having a conversation with my first boss, and I said, so we make chocolate. Is that it?
Yeah.
Is that what work is all about?
Yeah.
And he said to me, and he was a great first boss, he said, Marisa, you make chocolate. Chocolate makes people happy. You make people happy.
Okay.
And I thought to myself, that's really great, but I don't think that's going to be enough for me. And I found my way into healthcare through industrial engineering, which is really not a big field in the provider space. There's not many different organizations that hire in industrial engineers. But at UF Health, at that time Shands, We did have a very small industrial engineering department, and I was able to join that space and kind of function as a consultant, an internal consultant. So did queuing in the ER or queuing in pre-op. I also had a chance to work for the supply chain leader at the time. And then when he left and went to Wake Forest, he needed somebody to come run operations. And so that's how I get my foot in the door.
Got the band back together up there.
Yes, exactly right.
That's
exactly
the way it works
right.
sometimes. Now, was that industrial engineering at UF tied in with the academic training at all, or it was just separate from that? Like, were there students that ever rotated through that?
At Shands?
Yeah.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I think the reason I'm able to even come from manufacturing into healthcare was because as part of my senior project, I did work with that group at Shands at the time. And so they recognized my name and they were willing to interview me. So we did a few sort of we accepted interns from the program during that time. That's kind of how I was able to get in.
Shifting into a little bit more like intersection of revenue cycle and supply chain, what opportunities do you think exist between revenue cycle and supply chain to kind of collaborate more in the areas of overlap, really drugs, supplies, and permanent implants, I guess?
We're just getting started, right? But, between our different organizations or parts of the organization, there's so many areas. We are heavy on the expense side, you are heavy on the revenue side, and how do we make sure our two worlds are coming together? Our worlds have overlapped in the past, particularly on implants, as we have really gone after reducing the pricing of implants.
Some of the things I'm excited about are, there's some interesting things your team's doing with like drug rebates, drug replacement, making sure people have access to drugs, really, like that people that need it, that maybe are underinsured or have a gap or donut hole around their coverage. And so we're able to kind of fill that gap. So that stuff's one of the areas of excitement for me. What do you think that supply chain brings to the organization, and like what other benefits is it bringing other than just that logistics of making sure supplies are there for us to kind of use?
There's a core competency, a strategy element to it. I think that, creating and developing relationships with our suppliers as you have relationships with, your external partners is critical and key. We want to be that partner that they want to work with. At the end of the day, they're an important part of the ability to deliver care in our communities. And so making sure that we've got strong relationships are tied into new therapies or new supplies or new equipment or new instruments coming out is critical there. I think we also are an aligning function for the organization. So if we're having different contracts all over the place, in different facilities and markets, we probably aren't leveraging size and scale. And so how do we make sure that we are ensuring our strategies are in lockstep with what our markets want and need and what our physicians want and need? But how do we leverage, as big as AdventHealth is, to make sure we get strong pricing, to make sure that we are logistically, moving things around as efficiently as possible, and doing it from a fiduciary responsible way.
As I've observed it, your team does a really nice job of getting a sense from the clinicians, let's say in a radiology setting, for example, understanding what's coming and what do we need to start thinking about in terms of new therapies or new device, things that we need to procure. Where did that come from? Did you have a mentor or anybody like that helped you kind of understand that importance, or is that just come with the experience of, some of the prior work that you had done?
I feel like I've had some really awesome mentors and leaders along the way. And I also feel like I like learning from others, both their successes and their failures, and opportunities. I think, though, that in this space, it cannot be agendas or strategies that originate from a corporate office. It has to be, what are we doing that is meeting our clinicians?
Bottom up.
Exactly, where they need to be met. It does take a lot of coordination, a lot of leadership, a lot of socialization, a lot of intentionality and governances and moving things through with process and clear ways to, scope out a document, scope out what we're trying to do, answer questions on the financials. Like, there takes a lot of intentionality and putting the process in place to make sure that we are successfully gathering the right information from the right key stakeholders and then developing organization-wide strategies that, again, leverage our size and scale. And so I don't think you can do work in this space without a lot of input from our key stakeholders.
What are some strategies that we have used in the past, let's say with implants, where we're trying to strike this balance of cost and quality and having so many different range of suppliers to pick from and different maybe clinicians that have predispositions toward one or the other? Like, how do you really think about striking that balance of having the right, cost versus like too much choice versus having just a few choices?
First starts with data, right? We have to know, what are we purchasing across the organization and for whom and where is it going? And that's so how diversified are we as a company in a specific category? We're not talking about everything. Let's just take spinal implants. That's been a recent category that we've done. So knowing the data. The next phase is, okay, who is going to go on this journey with us? And so it's reaching out to all of our facilities that perform this specific category, in this spinal implant surgery. And who are the administrative and the surgeon folks that are going to come along this journey with us? We're going to bring together surgeons from across our organization, representatives and administratives from across our organization. In the case of spinal implants, we had 36 surgeons come together virtually and help develop our strategy. Again, we do a lot of work with data to come with recommendations or come with possible solutions. If we do this, that will yield us halfway to maybe where our goal is. If we do this, think about strategies such as an all-play strategy, all the players get to play. That may not yield us the pricing percentile that we think our organization should be able to achieve, especially in comparison to our competitors that are national organizations and do what we do. Another strategy might be a committed market share strategy, where we're going to commit a certain amount of the market share to a specified number of vendors. And in some cases that could be 4, in some cases that could be 2, in some cases that could be 12, depends on the category. But in all cases, it kind of comes back to this concept of innovation. In all cases, you have to leave some market share that's not committed, because we have to progress as an industry and as an organization and be able to bring in new innovation and supplies and make sure, talk about needing to make sure what our clinicians want. Those types of things are what clinicians also want. They want to be able to utilize innovative ideas and products. And so that's part of the strategy as well. Each category is different. Commodities are very different than our implants are. We wouldn't necessarily bring a group of surgeons together to talk about Band-Aids. That probably would not be their highest and best use. But in every case, we have a governance structure. We bring our recommendations to our executive committee for supply chain and business services, and that group is a cross-functional group from representatives from the market and from corporate, which ultimately have say on the strategies that we bring forward.
Do you think that that's unique to our kind of culture of like collaborating? Or is there a lot of other organizations that just, it's top down? It's like, hey, we've just decided we're doing these amount and that's what happens. Like, where do you think we fall on this kind of spectrum of just deciding and pushing it down versus like gaining all that feedback and then trying to make the decision?
I think most organizations would say that they do some sort of connected work. The way that we do it is truly authentic and really driving towards a co-created solution, very different than my academic medical center experience, where we have a very high amount of employed physicians, and we usually had a chair, and in many cases from a sourcing strategy standpoint had say. One person had say. You didn't have to go to all the regions, all the leaders, all the different folks. That was very different from that standpoint.
Before we continue, we wanted to thank you for tuning in. If you have questions or thoughts or just want to say hi, we'd love to hear from you. Send us an email at revcyclepodcast@adventhealth.com. That is REVCYCLE podcast@adventhealth.com. If you enjoyed this episode so far, be sure to like, subscribe, or follow so you never miss a new episode release. Now, let's get back to the rest of the episode. So what are some of the key challenges in obtaining pharmacy compounds these days? There used to be things I would read several years ago about shortages and generics that would be stocked out. Are those still our challenges today? And are there a lot of competitors in that kind of generic market these days?
I think COVID taught us that the world of shortages is part of the day-to-day. I think we had to structure ourselves in a way to manage the day-to-day aspects of shortages, be it pharmaceuticals or supplies. Mm-hmm. And so I think today we've got great processes in place and people who bring action-oriented, themselves action-oriented towards solutioning towards that, as part of their regular job. And so there's a lot more focus on that as the day-to-day work. Doesn't mean that they don't exist anymore. I think that we do still have drug shortages and we do still have supply chain shortages. I think that we have learned a lot around alternatives, and we have created a lot of lists and backup knowledge, and so we're able to pivot a little bit more easily. We've done a lot of the legwork around that, but they do exist today. And we have a team of folks at our organization that are very focused on drug acquisition cost, and then drug acquisition resiliency. Yeah. And I think we've made we've had a lot of focus and made a lot of improvements in resiliency as a whole, as an organization, just around the development of our consolidated service center. That really is born out of the need for us to be a more resilient supply chain at AdventHealth.
What are some of those alternatives that have come out? Is it compounding pharmacies? What are some of the alternative sources that the teams have figured out to make this all happen?
Well, compounding pharmacies exist. They don't exist for every drug that's out there. Understanding alternative suppliers at a more macro level, and where those folks are is an important aspect. I think we've seen even some onshoring of manufacturing of more of the products where we've seen a lot of disruption happening.
You'd mentioned that consolidated service center as one of those resiliency and kind of predictability features. Tell me a little bit about that model and how successful that's been in establishing kind of a robust supply chain here in Florida.
The way that we were getting notified of disruption was phone calls. We are sensing there's something happening in China, and I want you to know that there might be some disruption coming up. And that was the level of granularity. It's not a we are, and this is what's happening. We experienced such an immense amount of disruption, not just on PPE, but it flowed through many different supplies in due time. To your point, coming in those initial months, we recognized the need for us to proactively set up a distribution center, or a cross dock is really what it was, where we could bring in truckloads of PPE and turn around and ship them out to one of our 55 different facilities who we were monitoring their days on hand. And so we knew, and all of this was re-engineered real time. Yeah. So we had to get the data about how much PPE of a specific category every facility had days on hand. That was all created real time by the teams, both on site and our analytics team behind the scenes. Our sourcing team completely re-engineered and pivoted towards sourcing critical products, and that was from everywhere, and that was all night long, China hours, our hours, whenever that was needed. We were able to set up systems in the Kia Center. So you can't just bring in inventory. We have to have it lock into our ERP system. And so we quickly set up that whole infrastructure. We commandeered the Kia Center, which was the Amway Center, which is where the magic play for us in Orlando. Nothing was happening during that time. And we actually hired a ex-military logistician into that space, and he helped run point on all of that work. And we ran 4,000 pallets through the Kia Center in 40 days. Wow. And we're proactively getting signals from our markets on what they needed and pushing out product before they even needed it. And so some of the best feedback I remember getting over time has been from different nurses who have said, I just want you to know, during that time period, we didn't have to worry about PPE, and that spoke
better
to the
than
amazing.
Making chocolate.
Well, that is exactly. That's a big why, and there were a lot of hours by the team spent making all of that happen, and I'm so proud of everything that they were able to accomplish. Coming out of that, we recognized this need for more resiliency in our space and wanted, though we have great partners in the distribution space, we really wanted to own our own inventory and, have that one link in the chain higher, under our purview.
What about some growing challenges in just the like forgeries in supplies or low quality supplies? Like, what steps do your teams have to go through to kind of authenticate and that sort of thing? And like, how do you get that assurance that the product is what the folks say it is, or something like that in this day and age?
Forgery, as a term, was probably more heavily used during COVID time period.
Okay.
I don't think, when we were.
What did that mean?
Well, we were onboarding suppliers so fast, who the KN95 world,
Gotcha.
You couldn't source the N95s in, but we needed something, and we had clinical approval to use that. And so, the backup option was the KN95s at the time. And so trying to onboard supplier in a day, and that's what we were really charged to do, by the time the supplier called in the morning to the time that we went home that evening, bring them on board, and make sure we've got, that supplier. And so again, a lot of re-engineering of processes happening during that. I think during that period was when you saw the most sort of people trying to get away with different things, and they tried it on us too. I mean, we were not immune to that time period, but we had great teams in place to help double check and triple check the products, the quality of them. We engaged a lot of clinical folks during that time, and legal folks as we needed to as well.
So we talked earlier about some of the environmental and sustainable stuff, and even on this campus we have a lot of solar panels up now, and I know we're getting into wind. So maybe unpack that a little bit. What are some of the intentional strides that AdventHealth has made towards renewable energy?
Well, Rob is an amazing partner, Rob Roy, and he leads our investment portfolio, as you know, and so we make kind of a surprising duo maybe in this space, not who you'd think would be leading environmental sustainability, but in fact, and unbeknownst to us when we started this journey, a majority of our carbon footprint sits within the supply chain and the investment portfolio. 85% of our carbon footprint is within our two areas. And so it's been such a blessing and a joy to work with Rob, and he's, we're different thinkers that both bring something, I think, to the mix. And we've had amazing leadership with Paul and Terry over the years, who've helped to really want to do this work and move us forward. We committed to a 50% reduction in our scope 1 and 2 by 2030. How do we rethink electricity into being green electricity and coming from green sources? And so you've mentioned, solar and wind, and two of our biggest projects have been setting up a solar farm and a wind farm in Texas, two separate farms. Yep. One is 14,000 acres of wind and 3,000 acres of solar. They're huge farms out there. And they're generating green electricity on behalf of basically AdventHealth. And that energy goes into the grid, it feeds the grid, and AdventHealth gets to retire those renewable energy certificates. We have a fixed price that we pay for the energy that's produced, and then we sell it immediately. If it's trading higher, we get a payback. If it's trading lower, we pay out. And so it's been a really amazing project for our organization for the last couple of years, and we're on track to have 100% renewable electricity by next year. Wow. And so we're one of, I would say, the only provider out there that's really, actively hit that goal, or getting ready to hit that goal. Our focus this year, though, is really around engaging our different facilities. And so each facility at the end of the year, by the end of the year, will have completed and submitted a environmental sustainability plan for their facility. And they really get to select, what do they want to focus on? Do they want to focus on creating their own solar? Do they want to focus on EV charger stations? Do they want to focus on hydroponic farming? Whatever really hits their, for them, recycling, whatever it may be. They get to create that plan and then submit it back to us. But in the end, we're going to have a very comprehensive plan that begins to really get our team members involved heavily in this work as well, which has been such a, Rob and I regularly get emails and phone calls from team members across the organization who really just want to get engaged, want to know how to help, want to do what they want to do, this type of work. So it's been an amazing journey. We've had a lot of amazing folks help us get to where we are, and looking forward to continuing it.
In the revenue cycle, I've been sort of on a journey from world-class revenue cycle to kind of becoming preeminent. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about that from the supply chain perspective? So what do you think you need to do to go from a world-class operation to one that's sort of more, even better and preeminent?
I think there's always room for continuous improvement, and our worlds are so complex and layered that there's always that room for looking at this part of the process and looking at this part of the process, and how can we continue to improve and evolve. And so from my standpoint, it is about being open to constantly thinking about how to do things better and getting feedback from people, stakeholders all over the place, from internal to external, from above to below, from consultants to whomever, and really trying to think about, does that fit for us and what we're doing and trying to achieve, or does, is that a good thought and that I need to tweak or we need to think through a little bit differently.
We had our last guest ask, what is something that's hard to explain about your job to your family and friends?
I think people think supply chain is black and white, and that the logistics are what they are, and that it's a pretty easy to make efficient process.
Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
I have too.
We look forward to seeing where things go in the next couple of years. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. Please make sure to like and subscribe to be notified when our next episode drops. We will see you next time.